MadWall Employee Orientation on the Health and Safety Fundamentals. Table of Contents. Occupational Health and Safety Policy. Employers' roles and responsibilities. Employees' roles, rights, and responsibilities. Supervisors and duties. Employee tasked with a supervision placement. Vulnerable workers in the workplace. New and young workers. Workplace hazards. Near-miss conditions. Reporting workplace hazards and near-miss conditions. Personal protective equipment. Back care and material handling. Slips, trips, and falls. Emergency response. Workplace violence and harassment. Pedestrian safety. Reporting accidents procedure. Health and Safety Committee and client representatives. Return to Work Program. WMIS 1988 and 2015. MSDS. Labels. Please read the following policy in detail. Employers' roles and responsibilities. When an employee is working for an agency client in the client's workplace, the responsibility of taking every precaution reasonable for protecting the employee is jointly shared between the client employer and the agency employer. Employers' obligations under the law include the duty to know the hazards in the workplace and acquaint a worker, supervisor, or a person in authority over a worker with any hazards in the work. Make sure your supervisors are competent persons as defined by OHSA when you appoint them. Develop and implement a health and safety policy and program. Provide ongoing information, instruction, and supervision to protect worker health and safety. Ensure that equipment, materials, and protective devices are provided as required by the law, maintained in good condition, and are always used as required by the law. Assist, respond to, and cooperate with health and safety committees or representatives as required by the law. Take every precaution reasonable in the circumstances to protect all workers, including temporary help agency workers on assignment. Employers' roles and responsibilities continued. Before placing the worker on a temporary work assignment with a client, the agency employer must ensure that the worker is qualified to do the work on an assignment for a client employer. Will be provided with information, instruction, and supervision to protect their health and safety at the workplace to which they are being assigned. It is against the law for employers to threaten, intimidate, discipline, or dismiss employees for following the OHSA regulations, exercising rights under the OHSA, and asking the employer to follow the OHSA. A worker who believes that the employer has taken reprisal against him or her for exercising his or her rights and responsibilities under the OHSA may file a complaint with the Ontario Labour Relations Board. Employees' roles, rights, and responsibilities. Under the OHSA, temporary help agency workers have the same rights and duties as permanent workers. MadWall ensures to follow all provisions and regulations on assignment employee rights as outlined in the Employment Standards Act by the Ministry of Labour. It is also the responsibility of the employee to ensure that all of their documentation is accurate and valid, including identification, diplomas, certifications, resume, etc. Documentation that is neither accurate nor valid should be corrected by the employee, for whom it is their responsibility to provide current and accurate versions of documentation. If the assignment description has stated, make sure to bring all personal protection equipment and necessary certifications and/or documentation unless instructed otherwise. Employees should dress appropriately for the assignment and follow any dress codes stated in the assignment description or by the hiring manager or human resources staff. Employees should remember that almost all assignments involve working with others. Thus, personal hygiene and cleanliness is required. Employees are to have read and fully understand the assignment description before beginning the assignment, while understanding that the hiring manager or human resources staff may provide further instruction before the assignment begins or while the assignment is in progress. If the employee is concerned, they are encouraged to contact the client directly. Employees' roles, rights, and responsibilities continued. It is the responsibility of the employee to report any items which are deemed to be unsafe. Employees should also know their rights and responsibilities related to work and understand that it is their right to refuse work which they believe to be unsafe. It is the responsibility of the employee to make sure they understand the task or assignment given to them by the hiring manager or supervisor. The employee must fully understand what is required of them before they begin performing any work. The employee must also abide by all the rules and policies of the organization at which they are working their assignment, as well as obey the law. It is the employee's duty to refuse work for any client if you deem you have not been provided sufficient information regarding workplace health and safety training and/or awareness. It is the employee's duty to refuse work for any client if the client denies the employee from safety protection equipment that is required. It is the employee's duty to deem if the equipment provided by the client has been maintained and is in good condition. The employee is to know about any workplace hazards to which they may be exposed. The employee should participate in identifying workplace health and safety concerns and ask the supervisor or employer questions if concerned about your health and safety. Finally, the employee is to refuse unsafe work. The OHSA sets out a specific procedure that must be followed in a work refusal. Supervisors and duties. OHSA defines a supervisor as a person who has charge of a workplace or authority over a worker. Specific duties of a supervisor under the OHSA are to make sure that workers work in compliance with the OHSA and its regulations. Make sure that workers use any equipment, protective device, or clothing required by the employer. Tell workers about any potential or actual health or safety dangers that the supervisor is aware of. Where prescribed, provide workers with written instructions about measures and procedures to be taken for the workers' protection. Take every precaution reasonable in the circumstances to protect workers. Employee tasked with a supervision placement. OHSA defines a supervisor as a person who has charge of a workplace or authority over a worker. This broad definition can apply to many different people in the workplace, including people in management, on the shop floor, in a bargaining unit, and the individuals whose job title does not include the word supervisor. In general, charge of a workplace refers to broad control over the planning of work and how it is carried out. Authority over a worker can be seen as a more specific power to ensure a worker's compliance with directions. An employer must ensure that a worker is competent before appointing them to be a supervisor. Being competent means the supervisor must have enough knowledge, training, and experience to organize the work and how it is to be performed. The supervisor must also be familiar with the OHSA and any regulations under it that may apply to the workplace and know about any actual or potential health and safety hazards in the workplace. Vulnerable workers in the workplace. Vulnerable workers are those who work in sectors where they may be at greater risk of having their rights violated and who may lack the ability or resources to understand their rights. Vulnerable workers include temporary foreign workers, young workers, newcomers to Canada, and those whose first language is neither English nor French. Ontario has multilingual phone lines for employment standards, 1-800-531-5551, and occupational health and safety, 1-877-202-0008. New and young workers. Young workers are workers under the age of 25. New workers can be of any age who are on the job for less than 6 months or who are assigned to a new job. Workers new to a job are 3 times more likely to be injured during the first month of a job than more experienced workers. Employers are required to take every reasonable precaution in the circumstances for the protection of workers. Ensure workers meet sector-specific minimum age requirements. Ensure equipment, materials, and protective devices that are provided are maintained and in good condition. Provide workers with information, instruction, and supervision. Prepare and review, at least annually, a written occupational health and safety policy and develop and maintain a program to implement that policy if there are more than 5 workers in the workplace. Post a copy of the OHSA in the workplace. New and young workers, continued. Supervisors are required to ensure workers work in compliance with the OHSA and its regulations. Ensure any equipment, protective device, or clothing required by the employer is used or worn by workers. Advise workers of any potential or actual health or safety dangers known by the supervisor. Where prescribed, provide workers with written instructions about measures and procedures to be taken for the workers' protection. Take every precaution reasonable in the circumstances for the protection of workers. Workers are required to work in compliance with the OHSA and its regulations. Use or wear equipment, protective devices, or clothing required by the employer. Report to the employer or supervisor the absence of or defect in any equipment or any protective device of which the worker is aware. Report any known workplace hazards or OHSA violations to the supervisor or employer. Be aware of their rights under the OHSA, such as the right to refuse unsafe work, except in specified circumstances. Workplace hazards. Workplace hazards can be any hazard in the workplace which can either injure you or others. Hazards can be physical, biological, ergonomic, chemical, and psychosocial. Examples of such hazards include slips, trips, and falls, repetitive tasks, workplace violence and harassment, flammable materials and chemicals, fungi and mold, unguarded machinery and moving machinery. Workplace hazards continued. Before beginning work duties, employers, supervisors, and employees should discuss all potential work hazards which exist on the job. Employees should know what the hazards of the job are, if any special training is required, if any related protective equipment is required for the job, who they can speak to regarding their safety needs and questions. Near-miss conditions. Near-miss conditions is an unforeseen event that could have resulted in an injury, illness, or property damage, but did not do so. In other words, it is a close call. All near-miss incidents should be reported to the supervisor as soon as possible. Reporting workplace hazards and near-miss conditions. If you are to witness any exposure to hazards or near misses, it is your responsibility as an employee of MadWall to report these conditions to your supervisor. By reporting these incidents, future incidents may be minimalized and/or stopped from occurring. Ask your supervisor for help or clarification on reporting workplace hazards and near misses. For more information on reporting workplace hazards and near misses, please refer to MadWall's OHS manual. Personal protective equipment. Personal protective equipment is designed to protect against safety and/or health hazards by either preventing or reducing the severity of an injury if an accident occurs. Personal protective equipment provides protection but cannot eliminate the hazards. Some common examples of personal protection equipment include hard hats, safety glasses, safety boots, hearing protection, example noise-canceling headphones, respiratory protection, example face masks. Employees are required to use or wear equipment, protective devices, or clothing required by the employer. Supervisors are required to ensure any equipment, protective device, or clothing required by the employer is used or worn by the employees. Back care and material handling. Back care. Correct lifting techniques. Material handling. Material handling do-nots. Equipment for assistance. Posture. Exercise. Back care and material handling. Nearly 1/4 of all injuries in the workplace are back-related, which result from lifting excessive weight and improper lifting techniques. To prevent these injuries from occurring, you must have correct lifting techniques, correct posture, regular exercise. Correct lifting techniques. Plan your move. Size up the load. Make sure your pathway is clear. Ask for help if needed. Use devices such as a dolly if necessary. Use a wide balanced stance with one foot slightly ahead of the other. Keep the load as close as possible to you with a firm grip. Tighten the muscles in your stomach at the beginning of the lifting process. Use your legs to lift the load while maintaining your lower back in an arched position. When making a turn, make sure to pick up your feet and pivot. Do not twist your back. When lowering the load, maintain the arch in your back and place the load slowly. Material handling. Weight transfer. Pull the object towards you while transferring your weight to your strong side. Shift your weight to your other leg while pushing the object into position. Lifting pipe. Lift pipe at one end, walk to midpoint, balance on shoulder. Pipe carts can be used to transport a load of pipes. Ask for assistance if the pipe is too heavy. Sheet materials. When you handle sheet materials, make sure to protect your back by using proper lifting techniques. Store sheets at a convenient height and above ground on timbers or trestles. Grasp sheet on the long side at midpoint. Tip sheet up and then slide sheet partway off pile. Carry sheet, keeping back erect. Avoid leaning to one side. Material handling. Lifting with support. Supporting yourself by placing one hand on your thigh and the other on a secure object. You can reduce stress on your spine and knees. Balancing the load. Any activity that unevenly loads the spine may lead to back injuries. Make sure to avoid one hand lifting if possible and try to distribute the weight evenly between both hands. If you cannot avoid single-handed lifting, hold the free arm straight to counterbalance the load. Two-person lift. Lifters should be of similar height and weight. Carrying on stairs. Lifters should be aware of their surroundings and assess the pathway to make sure it is clear of any objects. If the load is heavy, the lift may require 2 or more qualified personnel. Lifters should watch each step and carefully make their next move with precision and accuracy. Material handling. Do not lift above shoulder height because it can cause stress on your spine. Do not catch falling objects. Do not pull. Make sure to push rather than pull to maintain the arch in your back. Equipment for assistance. Rolling frame scaffolds with tube and clamp components can be used to move pipe and other material. A small rolling scaffold can be used to transport tools and other materials. Metal baskets can be used to store loose fittings and short lengths. These can then be transported by forklifts. There are also hand-operated devices that are less likely to cause back pain and handle material safer. They include chain fall, chain hoist, pipe cart, mechanical derrick, forklift. Correct posture. Common postures. Normal. Standing for long periods of time often causes an increased curve in your back. Therefore, take stress off your back by shifting weight from one foot to another. Sway back. An increased curve in your lower back will jam your vertebrae together. If held for too long, the position will cause muscles to tighten, which will lead to lower back pain. Flat back. A flat back with too little of a curve will put extra pressure on your front discs, which could lead to disc pain. Remember, bending over to work can contribute to pain and injury. It is ideal to keep the work between waist and shoulder height. Exercise. Working can strengthen some muscles while others become weaker, creating muscle imbalance. A regular exercise routine can help prevent this from happening. You should do the following: warm up, work out, stretch, cool down. Types of exercise: march in place, arm circles, stretching program, knees to chest, hip stretch, thigh stretch, calf stretch, hamstring stretch. Slips, trips, and falls. Many workplace injuries occur due to slips, trips, and falls on working surfaces. It is important to understand how slips, trips, and falls happen in the workplace, how to identify hazards and eliminate these accidents from occurring. Slips. Slips happen because of the lack of friction between footwear that we use on the surface. Common causes of slips happen from loose rugs and mats, as well as spills and hazards created from weather conditions. Trips. Trips occur when you lose your balance due to your foot striking another object with a lack of awareness. Common causes of trips are clutters on the floor, example, power cords, or uneven walking surfaces, example, steps. Falls. Falls can occur from both flat surfaces and heights. Falls usually result from slips or trips where your center of gravity is shifted, which causes you to lose balance. How to prevent slips, trips, and falls. It is important to select suitable walking surfaces for your workplace. Have proper housekeeping standards. Wear appropriate footwear to minimize the risk of a slip, trip, or fall. Report any slips, trips, or falls to your supervisor. Report any unexpected change in the contact between your feet and the walking surface. Follow the rules in the workplace. Do not rush to a destination under any circumstance. Watch your step and be aware of your surroundings. Emergency response. In the case of an emergency, do any of the following as it relates to the situation. The emergency helpline is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week via the MadWall app. Report to the direct supervisor, after which first aid will be administered by a certified personnel. Evacuation plan and procedure as laid out by the employer. All injuries and incidents are to be communicated to MadWall's Health and Safety Committee via emergency helpline. First aid. According to St. John's Ambulance, first aid is emergency help given to an injured or suddenly ill person using readily available materials. It could be as minor as cleaning and bandaging a paper cut, or as complex as providing care to an individual who has been struck by a heavy piece of equipment. There are 3 objectives of first aid, regardless of the situation. Preserve life, prevent the injury or illness from becoming worse, promote recovery. First aid, continued. The first aid requirement regulation, Regulation 1101, under the Workplace Safety and Insurance Act, details the obligations of employers regarding first aid equipment, facilities, trained personnel, first aid procedures in all workplaces. The Act authorizes the WSIB to penalize employers who do not comply with these requirements. First aid equipment and requirements. A first aid station must be provided and maintained by the employer. The first aid equipment must be placed in a location that is easily accessible at all times. Companies that use service vehicles must ensure that first aid kits are provided in every vehicle. If workers are operating heavy construction and maintenance equipment at a considerable distance from the first aid station, then they must also be provided with a first aid kit. Each kit must be inspected quarterly with a corresponding inspection card signed and dated. Regulation 1101 provides the details of the contents. Facilities. For small facilities with few employees, the first aid kit can be simply placed in an easily accessible area. Large companies that have over 200 employees are required to have a first aid room. On a construction project, the general contractor has the responsibility to provide the first aid station, which would be located at the site office. On a large project, an additional first aid station must be in place to ensure timely access to treatment. In all cases, the regulation requires you to post the WSIB Form 82 in case of injury at work poster, a first aid inspection card, and a valid first aid certificate of the first aid providers in the workplace. Trained personnel. Employers must ensure that first aid is provided by knowledgeable and trained workers. Regulation 1101 specifies training either the St. John Ambulance Emergency or standard first aid levels, depending on the amount of employees in the workplace. Emergency level first aid training generally includes the following mandatory topics: emergency scene management, shock, unconsciousness and fainting, choking, severe bleeding, on-site rescuer CPR. Trained personnel, continued. Standard level first aid training is a more extensive program that includes the mandatory topics from emergency first aid as well as elective topics, which are fractures, head and spinal injuries, joint, chest, hand, eye, pelvic, abdominal, and crush injuries, multiple injury management, burns and poisoning, medical conditions such as allergies and diabetes, environmental illnesses such as exposure to heat or cold, artificial respiration, automated external defibrillator. Trained personnel, continued. Procedures are known to change from time to time, and therefore it is important for the employers to keep the training up to date. Recertification is usually required every 3 years. If the workplace is very small and employs 5 or fewer workers, the employer needs to ensure that a worker is certified in at least St. John's Ambulance Emergency First Aid or equivalent and is available on site to provide first aid. When 6 or more workers are employed in a workplace, the regulation requires St. John's Ambulance Standard First Aid or equivalent training for the first aid providers. Ensure that additional workers are trained in the event of the designated provider's absence. First aid procedures. To ensure that an injured or ill worker receives appropriate and timely first aid treatment, an employer should have a written first aid procedure as part of their health and safety program. The health and safety procedure should cover the following: provisional first aid kits, transportation to medical treatment, document posting requirements, availability of trained first aid providers and training recertification, mandatory reporting and recording requirements. The First Aid Requirements Regulation requires that each first aid kit contain a current edition of the St. John Ambulance First Aid Manual. The manual will contain information and details regarding first aid treatment for a worker who is injured or who suddenly becomes ill. Evacuation plan and procedure. In the event of an alarm or an emergency evacuation, please evacuate using the nearest exit. How to respond. Gather in your designated meeting area unless instructed otherwise by an emergency personnel. Do not re-enter the building or move unless told to do so by an emergency personnel. Assist people with disabilities if it is safe to do so. If it is not safe to do so, then contact and notify the nearest emergency personnel. Do not use elevators. How to respond in the event of a fire. Call 911 to alert emergency personnel. Find the nearest fire alarm and activate, if it is safe to do so. Follow directions given by the emergency personnel. Do not re-enter the building or move to another location unless told to do so by an emergency personnel. Emergency helpline. In case of any emergencies, please call MadWall's emergency helpline, which is available on your mobile application. If you require immediate medical attention, please dial 911. For all other emergencies, please access MadWall's emergency helpline, which will provide you with instructions on how to proceed. Please read the following policy in detail. 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 Workplace violence and harassment. Reporting and investigation. 1. Report the incident. It is the responsibility of the worker to report any concerns or complaints related to workplace violence and harassment to their respected supervisors or human resources management. If the employee is exposed to workplace violence or harassment, they should relocate to a safe location at the workplace and immediately report the incident that represents any danger or physical harm to their supervisor and/or human resources management. 2. Investigation. MadWall is responsible for thoroughly investigating all incidents, complaints, and reports made by the assignment employee. These reports will be taken very seriously by MadWall, and an investigation will be taken immediately and as confidential as possible by a certified investigator. To maintain a safe workplace and the integrity of its investigation, MadWall will suspend workers with or without pay, depending on the nature of the incident, pending the investigation. If the incident involves an employee who is not a MadWall assignment employee, they may not be entitled to the same rights as the MadWall employee. At the conclusion of the investigation, a written report with all corrective actions from the investigations will be completed within 10 calendar days. Any worker that is responsible for violating the workplace violence and harassment policy will be subject to rapid disciplinary action, which includes termination of employment and/or termination of a contract. 3. No retaliation. MadWall will not discipline or retaliate against any employee for raising concern about workplace violence or harassment when raised in good faith. MadWall encourages the employee to raise concerns and immediately report to their respected supervisor to resolve the issue before escalation. If an employee is making false reports or accusing someone of an act that they are not responsible for, they will be subject to disciplinary action. Pedestrian safety. Being vigilant and aware of moving machinery in the workplace, especially forklifts, is a big part of pedestrian safety. Pedestrians and other bystanders can be seriously injured if they are struck by a forklift or by falling loads. Pedestrians should observe these rules in the presence of forklifts. Use pedestrian walkways or stay to one side of the equipment aisle. Be aware that load trucks cannot stop immediately as they are designed to come to a gradual stop to protect loads and maintain stability. Do not walk under a load which is elevated. Forklifts always have the right of way. Do not stay in the blind spots or directly behind forklift drivers, as the forklift operator may not be able to see you. At intersections and corners, be alert for forklifts and listen for horns. Reporting accidents procedure. Injuries on the worksite are not uncommon. To mitigate the risks to your health as much as possible, please follow MadWall's accident reporting procedure. 1. Communicate your injury to a direct supervisor immediately. First aid will be administered by a trained individual. 2. Contact MadWall through our emergency helpline as soon as possible. Further instructions may be given. 3. Seek medical care if it is required. Submit all forms and documents within 24 hours of receiving the documents. 4. If your physician deems you unable to work the current assignment, please follow the Return to Work program. Health and Safety Committee and Clients Representatives. MadWall Incorporated has a Health and Safety Committee that is there to help you in the case of any health or safety issue. All concerns are to be submitted to the committee as soon as possible. In case of an emergency, use the emergency helpline. Otherwise, please submit the concern via email. MadWall's Health and Safety Committee is responsible for identifying workplace hazards, recommend solutions to clients, investigation for accidents, and looking for ways to improve the health and safety programs and procedures. When entering a worksite, locate and familiarize yourself with the safety representatives on site as well as the direct supervisor. Report all health and safety concerns to these individuals immediately. Similarly, follow up with MadWall. The responsibility of a health and safety representative is to inform the employer of any workplace hazards, site walks, recommendations to the employer for a safer worksite, and investigating accidents. Return to Work Program. In the case of an injury, MadWall will do its best in assisting in the recovery period. This includes guiding the employee to find assignments that will best match with their injury. If an injury occurs, follow MadWall's accidental reporting procedures. Follow up with all related documentations within the first 24 hours of receiving the documents. Email MadWall to fill out an accident investigation form immediately. Follow the recovery plan outlined by your physician and submit all related documents within the first 24 hours of receiving the documents. Schedule all appointments for recovery outside of working hours. For choosing jobs, carefully read the description of the job and choose an assignment which you will be able to perform with ease. Contact MadWall via email if you are not able to find an assignment. You are expected to adhere to MadWall's terms and conditions when accepting an assignment while injured. This includes, but is not limited to, arriving on time, being able to perform work as outlined, and have the required skills and equipment if necessary. With this being said, please work in a self-paced manner to further avoid injury. Once you are deemed able to return to regular work, you are to submit documentation indicating this, after which you are to return to the regular process. WHMIS. WHMIS, or Workplace Hazardous Material Information System, has been created to ensure the safety of employees working in areas with hazardous materials. It is to educate the employee to prevent injuries, illness, disease, and death. As an employee of MadWall, you have the responsibility to be educated and aware of all types of hazardous material you are exposed to at your assignment. These hazardous materials could pose a risk to yourself, your subordinates, coworkers, and supervisors. WHMIS 2015 is in the transition and has been created to a globalized standard. This will help decrease the risks. To ensure you have adequate training when you arrive at your workplace, MadWall will be educating you in both WHMIS 1988 and WHMIS 2015. By the end of the material and quiz, you will know the basics of both WHMIS 1988 and WHMIS 2015, as well as the main difference between the two. procedures in handling, disposing of, storing, and identifying the hazardous material. How to read workplace and supplier labels and their significance. Identifying either a material safety data sheet, WMIS 1988, or a safety data sheet, WMIS 2015, and their significance. Procedure to follow in the event of an incident involved with everyday handling for hazardous material. WMIS 1988 versus WMIS 2015. Controlled products, WMIS 1988, and hazardous products, WMIS 2015. Classifying hazardous materials in the workplace have new rules. 6 hazard classes, WMIS 1988, and 32 hazard classes, WMIS 2015. Labels now have new requirements. Example, 8 symbols in WMIS 1988 and 10 pictograms in WMIS 2015. Material safety data sheets with 9 sections in WMIS 1988 and safety data sheets with 16 sections in WMIS 2015. WMIS 2015 has 2 main hazard classes instead of 1. These classes are physical hazards and health hazards. WMIS fact sheet. 32 hazard classes in WMIS 2015 compared to 6 hazard classes in WMIS 1988. WMIS 2015 is broken down into 2 main hazards instead of 1. These 2 main hazards are health hazards and physical hazards. MSDS are now called safety data sheets. Symbols are now called pictograms, shaped as a square diamond. There are 3 main elements of WMIS 2015. Workplace labels, supplier labels and workplace labels, safety data sheets or material safety data sheets, worker training. Suppliers send labels and safety data sheets to employer. Employer educates employee, and the outcome is an informed worker with the education to handle these hazardous materials properly. All hazardous materials need to have a material safety data sheet or a safety data sheet with the products. Employees' responsibilities. MadWall employees are to be aware and practice extreme precaution while working with hazard materials on their assignments. Some of their responsibilities of the workers are participating in WMIS training, complying with all health and safety regulations and law set out by both provincial and federal governments, as well as MadWall's terms and conditions. Handle all hazardous material safely and with care. Ask your direct supervisor for assistance if needed. Never use unlabeled products. If the product is unknown to yourself, treat it as a hazardous material. Immediately ask your supervisor to label the product with either an MSDS or an SDS before continuing with work. WMIS 1988, Classification and Symbols. Classification A, compressed gas. Handling methods. Do not drop. Handle with care. Keep away from potential heat and ignition sources. Store in designated areas. Hazards and description. Air or liquids that are in a pressured container. Air or liquids that boil below or at normal temperatures. Example, oxygen. Class B, flammable and combustible material. Keep away from potential heat and ignition sources. Keep away from other combustible material. Do not smoke near or around these products. Store in designated areas. Must be a cool and fireproof area. Hazards and description. Any solid, liquid, or gases prone to catching fire under regular working conditions. Existence of a spark could cause a risk of catching fire. Example, acetone. WMIS 1988, Classification and Symbols, continued. Class C, oxidizing material. Keep away from potential heat and ignition sources. Keep away from other combustible material. Store in designated areas. Must be a cool and fireproof area. Do not smoke near or around these products. Wear all personal protective equipment. Store in designated areas. Must be a cool and fireproof area. Description. Any material prone to catching fire under regular or irregular working conditions. Example, chromic acid. Class D, poisonous and infectious material. Handle with extreme caution. Avoid contact with eyes and skin. Do not inhale. Work near well-ventilated areas. Wear all personal protective equipment. Take all precautions. Store in designated areas. Description. Material causing immediate and serious toxic effect. Material causing other toxic effects. Biohazardous infectious material. Death, immediate injury, long and short-term health issues, disease, and illness are some of the risks when exposed to even tiny amounts of hazardous materials. Examples: ammonia, asbestos, contaminated blood products. Class E, corrosive material. Avoid contact with eyes and skin. Wear all personal protective equipment. Do not inhale. Work near well-ventilated areas. Ensure containers are sealed properly and tightly. Description: caustic and acidic material that will burn or destroy skin, can eat through metal. Examples: hydrochloric acid, sodium hydroxide. Class F, dangerously reactive material. Do not drop. Open containers with extreme caution. Store in designated areas. Must be a cool and fireproof area. Keep away from potential heat and ignition sources. Description: extremely sensitive material, prone to self-react and may cause explosions when exposed to temperature and pressure differences, as well as physical shock. Example: acetylene. WMIS 2015, Classifications and Pictograms. WMIS 2015 has two different hazard groups. Physical hazards. There are 19 physical hazard classes. Health hazards. There are 12 health hazard classes. In WMIS 2015, a hazard category is a subcategory of a hazard class which identifies the level of risk associated with the hazard class. A Category 1 hazard is the highest level of hazard. A Category 2 hazard is the second highest level of hazard, and so on. Physical hazard classes: flammable gases, flammable aerosols, flammable liquids, flammable solids. Description and hazards: ability to ignite easily. Main hazard is an explosion or a fire. Oxidizing gases, oxidizing liquids, oxidizing solids. Description and hazards: these classes may cause a fire and/or intensify the fire. Gases under pressure. Description and hazards: usually pressurized gases or liquids in a container or cylinder. Prone to explode if changes in heat, pressure, or in the event of the physical shock. Self-reactive substances and mixtures. Description and hazards: products that may self-react and cause fires or explosions. Pyrophoric liquids, pyrophoric solids, pyrophoric gases. Description: products that can catch on fire spontaneously when exposed to air. Self-heating substances and mixtures. Description: similar to pyrophoric products, however, will result in a fire or explosion only after being exposed to the air for a long period of time or in a greater quantity. Substances and mixtures which, in contact with water, emit flammable gas. Description: products that release flammable gas when exposed to water, can ignite spontaneously. Organic peroxides. Description: products that cause fires or explosions when exposed to heat. Corrosive to metals. Description: products that will eat away at or destroy metal. Combustible dust. Description: fine solids that, when dispersed in the air, may result in a fire or explosion. Simple asphyxiates. Description: products that may remove or displace oxygen from the air, can cause suffocation, usually rapid suffocation. Physical hazards not otherwise classified. Description: if a product is labeled as this, it is very important to read the SDS. Any product that may cause injury or death that does not fall in the above classes. WMIS 2015, classifications and pictograms, health hazard classes, acute toxicity, description, fatal, toxic, or harmful products that are exposed to the skin or digested. Acute toxicity may occur with a single dose of exposure. Effects may show up 24 hours after ingestion or 4 hours after inhalation. Skin corrosion or irritation. Description: products that cause corrosion or irritation to the skin. Serious eye damage or eye irritation. Description: products that cause eye damage or irritation. Respiratory or skin sensitization. Description: products that are inhaled will cause difficulty breathing, similar symptoms to asthma. If exposed to the skin, it may cause allergic reactions. Germ cell mutagenicity. Description: products that may cause cell mutation or genetic defects. May be permanent or temporary. May be passed on to future generations. Carcinogenicity. Description: products that may cause cancer. Reproductive toxicity. Description: products that may cause damage to the human reproductive system, male or female. These products may also affect unborn children and may cause harm to breastfed children. Specific target organ toxicity, single exposure. Description: these products may cause organ damage after being exposed once. This also includes respiratory irritation or drowsiness and dizziness. Specific target organ toxicity, repeated exposure. Description: these products may cause organ damage after being exposed multiple times for a prolonged period of time. Aspiration hazard. Description: products, if swallowed or inhaled, may be fatal to the worker's health. Biohazardous infectious materials. Description: microorganisms, nucleic acids, or proteins that may cause infection with or without toxicity in humans or animals. Health hazards not otherwise classified. Description: products that do not fit into the above categories. If labeled under this, workers must thoroughly read the SDS before handling the product. May cause severe injury or death. Exploding bomb, for explosion or reactivity hazards. Flame, for fire hazards. Flame over circle, for oxidizing hazards. Gas cylinder, for gases under pressure. Corrosion, for corrosive damage to metals as well as skin and eyes. Skull and crossbones, can cause death or toxicity with short exposure to small amounts. Health hazard, may cause or suspected of causing serious health effects. Exclamation mark, may cause less serious health effects or damage to the ozone layer. Environment, may cause damage to the aquatic environment. Biohazardous infectious materials, for organisms or toxins that can cause disease in people or animals. Signal words: danger, high hazards, warning. Low-ranking categories and classes do not have a signal word. Hazard statements: brief statements to describe the types of hazards associated with the product. Precautionary statements includes storage, handling, first aid, personal protective equipment, and emergency measures. Also provides information on how to minimize and prevent exposure. Material Safety Data Sheets, MSDS, WMIS 1988, and Safety Data Sheets, SDS, WMIS 2015. The importance of a Material Safety Data Sheet, WMIS 1988, or a Safety Data Sheet, WMIS 2015, is to ensure the worker handling the product can protect themselves to the fullest. The Material Safety Data Sheet and Safety Data Sheet provides in-depth information on the product compared to a workplace or supplier label. This includes handling and storage, type of personal protective equipment required, what to do in the event of an accident, and much more. In the event of an injury, the Material Safety Data Sheet or Safety Data Sheet must be taken with the injured worker to the medical facility. This ensures the right treatments are given to the worker. Supplier responsibility. Supply complete Material Safety Data Sheet or Safety Data Sheet with the product in both English and French. Material Safety Data Sheets need to be updated every 3 years. Safety data sheets must be updated as soon as further information becomes available. Employer responsibilities. Ensure material safety data sheets and safety data sheets are readily available to all workers. Update the current material safety data sheets and safety data sheets when required. Assess products to ensure the information is correct. Sections of Material Safety Data Sheets, WMIS 1988. 1. Product identification and use. 2. Hazardous ingredients. 3. Physical and chemical data. 4. Fire and explosion data. 5. Reactivity data. 6. Toxicological data. 7. Preventative measures. 8. First aid measures. 9. Preparation information. Sections of Safety Data Sheets, WMIS 2015. 1. Product identification and use. 2. Hazard identification. 3. Composition and information on ingredients. 4. First aid measures. 5. Firefighting measures. 6. Accidental release measures. 7. Handling and storage. 8. Exposure controls and personal protection. 9. Physical and chemical properties. 10. Stability and reactivity. 11. Toxicological information. 12. Ecological information. 13. Disposal consideration. 14. Transportation information. 15. Regulatory information. 16. Other information. Workplace labels. Workplace labels are necessary when controlled products or hazardous products are produced on-site or when the controlled or hazardous product has changed containers. Workplace labels have 2 minor changes from WMIS 1988 to WMIS 2015. Controlled products are now called hazardous products. Updating workplace labels every 3 years to as soon as practicable after significant new data about the product becomes available. A workplace label must have the following 3 requirements: product identifier, safe handling instructions, an MSDS or an SDS available for the product. These labels are usually less informative than supplier labels and give basic identification and procedures on how to handle the material safely. The labels must be attached to the product's container. Supplier labels. Supplier labels are required when controlled or hazardous products have been received by an employer. The supplier must create a complete supplier label which gets attached to the container of the product. All WHMIS criteria must be followed. WHMIS 1988. 1. Product identifier. 2. WHMIS symbols. 3. Risk phrases. Example, dangerous if inhaled. 4. Precaution. Example, wear personal protective equipment. 5. First air measures. 6. Supplier identifier. 7. MSDS. WHMIS 2015. 1. Product name. 2. WHMIS pictograms. 3. Precautionary statements. 4. Initial supplier identifier. 5. Signal words. 6. Hazard statements.